Good to go. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm going to call to order our special open. It is June 17th and it's 5:02. Apologies, we're just a titch late. The town of Smithers acknowledges the Gitumden clan and the Wet'suwet'en people on whose unceded traditional territory we live, work, and play. We have no one in the gallery, so I'm skipping the webcast. And if I could have a motion to approve the agenda, please. Councillor Buikema, Councillor Ray. All in favor? Any opposed? And I'm just going to take a moment to step aside from that newly approved agenda, just to welcome our new face and staff member to the table. So we have joining us tonight for the first time at the council table, our new Director of Finance, Kevin Welsh. Welcome. We're very delighted to have you here. And we intend that you are staying for a very long time. So just so that you know that. So, and as is our practice, if there was anything you wanted to say, so we welcome you and give you an opportunity if you wanted to introduce yourself to council.
Hi, my name is Kevin Welsh. I moved here in July. My partner and I opened up Thai Optometry just over the street down there. I have about 10 years of government experience. I was at Squamish Lillooet Regional District for 5 years, and then I recently came from the Caribou Regional District. So I've been here about 3 weeks right now. All the staff here have been lovely, getting me up to speed and just working to get kind of figuring out the workings of the town of Smithers, get fit in here and knowing all the staff and meeting all you guys. So nice to be here and kind of work with you guys going forward.
Thanks, Kevin. Welcome. All righty. So we don't have anyone in the gallery, so there's no public comment period. So we really just have one item on the agenda, and it's bylaw 1987. We do have Mr. Allen here. If there's questions, it's on the agenda for adoption. So before we take any questions, if there are, may I just have a motion to adopt? Councillor Raven, Councillor Ray. Okay. Any questions for clarity? Councillor Leonard.
Thank you. I'll just start by saying, since we've had the individual come forward last week at our council meeting to talk about her struggles with her short-term rental, I've been approached by several people in the community who also have short-term rentals. I sort of take the responsibility myself of maybe not understanding completely the kitchen component. And when I was doing my research today, the way I read the provincial regulation is you can have a kitchen in a short-term rental, but our bylaw is going to say that you can't have a kitchen in a short-term rental. And if I, reserve short-term rentals, and I do all the time, I wouldn't reserve one that didn't have a kitchen. So I just am questioning whether we are being a bit too restrictive, and if there's a way to maybe just pause on that, or if Mr. Allen has some comments, I'd happy to hear them.
Thanks, Councillor Leonard. Mr. Allen.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Otto. So just for clarification, short-term operators can have a kitchen in a short-term rental, but it has to be in a secondary suite. And that secondary suite has to be a legal secondary suite, which means it has to have a building permit. So I think that's one of the challenges that, well, I know that's one of the big challenges that staff have been dealing with the whole short-term rental issue is kitchens that are not part of a secondary suite, and then the owners or operators are faced with the decision to either bring this secondary suite into up to building code or to decommission the suite. And staff have been working with the owners to the best of our ability to meet all the requirements. Yeah, and it's been challenging, but they are definitely we have put the additional definitions into the bylaw to clarify kitchen, secondary short-term rental definitions, and what the difference between a sleeping unit, which is like a bed and breakfast room, versus a short-term rental as well. So I think we have it covered in the bylaw.
Go ahead.
Okay, if there was a way to, maybe grandfather existing units until we kind of work things out, I could be supportive of that. But, asking people that have been running short-term rentals for years, to spend thousands and thousands of dollars that they may or may not have, like I'm really struggling with it. So if we're going to vote, I will vote against tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Leonard. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mayor Hutchell. Just one more piece of information for council is that we do have a secondary suite enforcement policy that staff follow. And that's what we have been applying when dealing with the secondary suites that are meant for short-term rentals. So until that policy is changed by council, that's how staff are operating. And it's really in the owners and the renters' best interest, because it's all about public safety really in the secondary suites. Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Allen. Maybe you could just speak a bit more on using the secondary suite as the short-term rental and talk about how we got to this part, why that decision, maybe just the steps. It's been a very long process. So just a little reminder on the steps that were taken to get us to this point.
Yeah.
Well, just using, it was really the piece about a short-term rental is permitted and it can have a kitchen as long as it's in a secondary suite. So there were some steps and thinking that led to that.
Yeah, that's correct, Mayor Hutchell. Mostly a lot of research with what other municipalities that have opted in or that are required to apply if they're over 10,000 population. So that's provincial regulation, and staff and recommended that to council last fall, and that was adopted in our original zoning bylaw amendments and business license bylaw amendments. What this bylaw is doing is just clarifying some of those points with secondary suites and short-term rentals and the whole kitchen issue that arose once staff started applying the short-term rental legislation. I wanted to also mention that if the bylaw is adopted tonight, staff have a guide that we've been working on that we could not publish yet until these amendments were adopted. And we feel that guide will help a lot of owners and operators in this process, in addition to the secondary suite checklist that is part of the business license application. Okay.
Just one more thing, and then I'll go to Councillor Patterson while I have my train of thought. It may be a awkwardly worded question, so I'll try to do this well. The decision was made to permit the short-term rental within the secondary suite. What is the alternative? So we're still looking at having legalized or units for rent that meet the building code in order to be safe for the occupants, be they short-term renters or long-term renters. So if the short-term rental was not couched in the secondary suite, would there be any practical difference to the short-term rental? I'm hoping that made sense. You talked about a sleeping unit. So if it wasn't a sleeping unit, but a full unit, would the same steps be required?
If it's a decommissioned suite, so it's now a sleeping unit. That is considered a bed and breakfast, which is also which can be advertised on a platform as a short-term rental. And what it means is there's no separation from the rest of the principal dwelling, the house. So it's meant to be part of the whole house, and, you know, without any of the fire separations or, you know, separate ventilation and kitchen requirements. It's basically just a sleeping room. It can have its own bathroom. That's fine. But we have been applying, you know, the decommissioning to several owners in town and in compliance with the building code, and it's been successful so far. So we do have a couple of just a couple of cases where that is happening. Does that answer the question?
Almost, that's
Okay.
good clarity on the sleeping unit. If we did not have the definition for the secondary suite, but someone wanted a short-term rental unit, including a kitchen, I guess what I'm getting at, is there any practical difference between the building code requirements if a short-term rental with kitchen were not couched within a secondary suite? What would be the difference? The real practical difference in a home? So we're embedding it in a secondary suite, but what if we didn't?
Yeah, it basically comes down to if there's a kitchen and a receptacle for an oven and range stove unit, then that's considered part of a working kitchen, which is meant to be a self-contained dwelling unit. So that is the big difference. And if they are present, then they just they require all the ventilation and safety requirements, fire separations, as per a secondary suite. We do permit, or the bylaw permits, short-term rentals in carriage houses, which are auxiliary buildings that totally separate. So that's available to owners. I'd have to check the numbers if you are. I think you're only permitted one though on a parcel, one short-term rental, but that is available as well.
Thanks, Mr. Allen. Okay, I'll hold there. I think I saw Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor Attrell. So I'll apologize to Mr. Allen up front because I did ask these questions, I think, at the last meeting, but I'm glad that someone else has raised it because I'm still struggling a little bit. So when we're talking about building code and safety, what I'm struggling to understand is, let's take this particular example that we had at our last council meeting that was raised. We're asking the individual just to pull the sink out of their suite. Can you just provide clarity for me when we talk about safety, and how does that make a suite any more or less safe if you're asking them just to pull out the kitchen sink? Thank you.
Mr. Allen.
May not be a safety, human public safety item, so to speak, but any plumbing does require a building permit. It's a plumbing permit, which is processed through our building permit. And, that is the case in several of the applications, that there's a kitchen. It could be just a microwave on a counter, but with the kitchen sink without a building permit, that's still considered an illegal suite. So it's either a decommissioning of the suite, which means removing the sink and removing the plumbing right to the wall, or making sure it's in compliance with the building code under a building permit.
Thank you. So a second question, you talked about other municipalities. So from my limited research, because I usually defer to staff and your opinions, like you said, you've looked at what other municipalities are doing. And I'm treading lightly here because I can't ask you obviously for your opinion, but do you think that there would be significant risk in if we were to look at the pros and cons of the definition of a kitchen for a secondary suite, or we're just suggesting that that would be completely in non-compliance with the provincial regulation?
Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mayor Ottrell. Yeah, our definition of kitchen does closely match some of the other municipalities in their zoning bylaws as well. And there's no definition of kitchen in the building code. It just refers to the the appliances must meet CSA standards, for example. All the plumbing must meet CSA standards and the plumbing code. So, it's just the application of the correct standards and codes that is part of the building permit process, whether that's not directly, I mean, whenever we have cooking facilities in a suite, that's when you're really referring to the more of the safety items, not necessarily the sink and the plumbing, of course. But even in plumbing, there's things like P-traps in the drains for sinks to make sure that sewer gases are not entering the suite. That's one of the most important elements of a plumbing inspection, right?
Counselor Ray.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it sounds like we're having a bit of second thoughts, but essentially the problem's they didn't put any regulations in place when the platform started to proliferate. So people took advantage, and as well they should. I agree with Councillor Leonard, but we're not allowed to grandfather things. Otherwise, it would be the same as an existing non-conforming if it was just up to us, but the province isn't going to allow that. And even in the case of the person that came to the public hearing, well, I have sympathy. They have a choice. They can take out their sink, or they can leave the sink and not have a suite or a short-term rental. And it's unfortunate that those choices have been placed on people that have already been operating, but that's how it's working. And we have to make sure we're upholding the building code, even though it might not make sense to us. There's lots of things in the building code that I'm not a builder. I didn't know that about the plumbing having to have a backstop for sewer gases. So I think staff's done a good job of a difficult situation, and I think we should be supporting them.
Thanks, Counselor Ray. Excuse me. Any other questions, Counselor Leonard?
I appreciate the information from Mr. Allen, and makes a bit of sense. I was a bit emotional today because I got it was a pretty heated conversation earlier. So I do appreciate the feedback and the need for we do have an obligation to follow the building code. So I understand that. I do feel for these people. And I guess I will support it, given what you've said. And I guess I'll just throw out maybe a suggestion of caution when dealing with these people that have been operating them. I've had comments, a couple that had a brand new house and they were being asked to provide engineering plans for this secondary suite or for the short-term rental. So just things like that, I guess, just, costs maybe where we don't really need to go. We should just be sensitive to cost to converting all of these suites up to building code.
I see you, Counselor. I'll just go to Counselor Elliott first. Counselor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a clarifying question maybe. So with the specific case of last time we talked about this with the resident, excuse me, who wanted to operate a short-term rental. So if they had a building permit previously for the sink that they have now, and it was okay, would they be allowed to operate an STR if it wasn't deemed a kitchen?
Mr. Allen.
Well, like most applications we receive, every one is different, and they're all, there could be other requirements at play, like ventilation, for example. In this case, I'm not sure if there's a stove included as part of the kitchen or just a sink, and it was approved under a building permit. But in that case, as long as it was under a completed and approved building permit, then it should be licensed as a STR. Yes.
Just to follow up, I was asking that would that be part of the assessment process, I guess, if someone would apply to have a STR permit and they had all the previous building permits approved, and then we inspected, or you guys inspected, and then they said, hey, there's a kitchen in here. And they're like, no, it's just a sink, but they already had all the approvals. So yeah, that's basically want to clarify, is that part of the process when we're going through these applications of, oh, this has already been approved through building permit process, they're good to go?
Mr. Allen?
Yeah, through our business license application process, which is required for the STR. That's one of our license inspector who does the premise inspection. He is also the building inspector. So there's that overlap. And yes, we have to confirm that there were previous approved building permits for previous work as part of the process. Yes.
Counselor Ray?
I'm good.
Okay, just a couple of things to make sure I'm on the right track. I'm going to try to summarize what I think. Just back to what Counselor Elliott said, though, I think something where we get caught up, whether it's an STR or just, excuse me, changes in our homes, is as time goes by, the code changes. And when you make an improvement, it's the code of today, not the code of yesteryear. So everything may have been good once upon a time, but it may not be good now. So I think that people get frustrated by that, but that, I think those are the rules. And, you know, with our building inspector, his job is to enforce the code. So he doesn't really have, it's not something it's optional for him to do. He must enforce the building code. Sorry, just choking here. I want to be clear, the last conversation about the sink, it was our information that the sink in the design that we saw actually was part of a kitchen. So that's just for clarity. I can't remember if you were here at that meeting or not. Prior to the meeting, I had spoken to our planner, to Ms. Chandran, and she said in the report that we received for that particular piece that she had also rolled out her interpretation and the report that she provided us to her cohorts of practice to make sure that the way that she was applying things was the best practice in the planning cohort. And she said it did meet that. So, you know, some things, it feels like we're kind of on a knife edge with some things, you know, you kind of fall one way or the other. But at the same time, you know, in that particular case, I thought the investigation that had been done was deep, and the conclusion that Ms. Chandran came to in the report that she gave us was good. You know, time will go, there may be changes in the future. It's that cookie, Counselor View, come on. So I just wanted to go back where I started in terms of the short-term rental and the secondary suite. That I don't think that there's a material difference, that staff are applying the code regulations and what we have in a secondary suite to a short-term rental that has full amenities in order to provide safety to those who stay there. So whether you're staying there for 35 days or 5 days, I see you nodding, Mr. Allen, but the expectation is that the code requirements are the same once a kitchen is installed, whether or not we had different language than secondary suite, that those requirements would be the same if we're installing the equipment that goes into a kitchen. So the heating appliances, the ventilation, and the plumbing for dishwashers or sinks. So I've got that right? Okay. Okay. Any other questions for clarity? Anything else? Anything on any other parts of the bylaw? Councillor Elliott.
I just want to make one comment. I think everyone is, when you're talking to people on the street, you want to have a good answer for them. So sometimes I think we might see more of this. So for me, who's dumb about some of the bylaws, it's good to understand why we're doing this, and it makes sense to me. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott. I think the one other thing is, this has been over a very long period of time. There has been lots of consultation. There have been lots of meetings. And there was also an under the gun sort of pressure to our staff for doing this. And I think as difficult as it might have felt at the town of Smithers, we are so fortunate in that we have planning staff. Many municipalities had to get through this without planners. Planners have been like gold the last couple of years with the bills that the province introduced that required the efforts of planning staff. So as arduous as it's been, and you know, the glitches along the way, of course, at least we had planning staff. We could have been doing through consulting firms or not meeting the deadlines at all. Okay, so thanks for providing the answers, Mr. Allen. The motion is to adopt. Is everyone ready? All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried unanimously, Ms. McKinley. Thanks. Okay. We don't have anything else, so I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the special open. Councillor Raven, Councillor Patterson, all in favor? Any opposed? And the special open is adjourned.